If there's something that needs to be done in the city that nobody else will do, then maybe we ought to do it. I think, as an example, at the time, at the height of the flower children and the hip movement in San Francisco, there was an obvious need for some kind of institution for runaways. Nobody would touch it. We had a juvenile judge, or head of the juvenile court at that time, who was back in the 19th century and who wasn't particularly helpful and who had threatened anybody that tried to get into this field. So that the YW, the YM, the other agencies in the city were afraid to touch the runaway problem. So Glide decided that a runaway house, something separate from the police and from the juvenile court, needed to be established, and Huckleberry's was started, which has become a prototype for runaway houses all across the country. And sure enough, the entire house and staff were busted, and we had to get them out of jail, but we won that round. Well, now Huckleberry's is now known as Youth Advocates, and it's separately incorporated entirely on its own and getting funding from many sources. Glide still keeps an informal relationship to it, but where at one time we were the administrator and the starter of the project, it now is on its own. And I think this is partly this whole matter of seeding or starting operations and then helping them go on their own. I think we tend to emphasize things that young adults are doing, the new generation, as an endorsement factor, as really a kind of strategy of if young adults aren't helped to do things that are creative, they're going to turn to fairly destructive things or become very apathetic, and we feel that there's real need to help that, the new generation, so to speak. There are some limitations. I think, quite frankly, we don't help Communist Party activities. We've been burned, you might say, by the Socialist Workers' Party and the Progressive Labor Party particularly, and we tend to say, look, they've got their own possible sources of financing, we're not going to fuss with them. We tend to stay away from some of the other religions. We've had meditation centers and Buddhist groups and this kind of thing come to us for help, and our feeling is that religious movements ought to be able to get it together on their own. We tend to help those things that are more community-oriented. We tend to emphasize those things done by the young, particularly third world young. And I think we tend to emphasize those things that tend to form new styles of institutions, new ways of doing things, where they're actually providing new alternatives in our society. I think, in a sense, helping the society to be more pluralistic.